Hello, you. It's me. Today we're going to talk about The Feed by M.T. Anderson. This book is set in the future where most people in society at a very young age get an implant called The Feed, which lets them access the internet in real time to stream information, to buy things, but also on the flip side of that, have information like advertising broadcast at them. It follows a boy on a trip with his friends, and they meet a girl whose experience of the feed is very different than their own. They're assaulted by a hacker in a bar who deliberately damages the feeds of a lot of people with a virus, as he's an anti-feed protester. And the story is about the relationship between the boy and the girl, Titus and Violet, the events following the hack, the road to recovery, and sort of how things unfold after that. To me, this did feel a little bit like an episode of Futurama, but I think it's because it's a very exaggerated and cartoony prediction of things to come. And I'll tell you, this book is interesting. It's really, really interesting, but really depressing at the same time to read. And there's a theme running throughout the book. I'd say the main theme of the book is ignorance. And that's in terms of Violet's attitude to Titus, who in her eyes has everything, lives in the lap of luxury. The extent to which Titus doesn't realise how, as a consumer, his entire personality is compromised by the feed. Parallel to that, there's a background hum of sort of world disorder, with every other country holding America accountable for environmental, economic crises, and the world is sort of on the brink of war. And the American public just being completely unaware of anything that's going on outside their borders. And the fact that they are just cogs in a huge consumerist machine. There's a lesson in that, in terms of handing control of your life over to media. You're often unsure as to what that media is going to let you see. So you're not only letting a machine make a decision about how you live your life, but also how much you know and how able you are to stand up and say something is wrong. And there's a lot of, in this book, there's a lot of themes of sort of nonchalance and docility that I think is what the consumerist society aspires to in its consumers. And as well as showing the flaws in Titus and his friends, it does also show the flaws in people like Violet in terms of making assumptions. And this is good, it's well done, because in confrontations, it makes you weigh up, okay, who's the jerk here? And it often is not an obvious answer. While I do not want to, for a minute, devalue online friendships, this book is very heavy with, if you limit yourself to online connectedness, you do cause a disconnect in person-to-person relationships. I'm not sure how true that is, but there's definitely a line that blurs, and that's explored in here, if the people you're online with, because the internet is all permeating, are also the people around you. It's a showcase more than anything of the dangers of dependency and the disparity between people who have access to technology and people who don't. And also, whether to give your child things that you know are dangerous or are in your eyes dangerous because every other child has it. Is it going to make their life easier? It's an exaggeration, I think, of probably what happened when the very first generation of kids started to get smartphones. And what is good about this is it doesn't feel like it was written by a technology bad boomer. And it's really a cautionary tale about misuse and excess and the dangers of completely unhinged, in-your-face advertising and the effect that has on children. One thing I think this book did capture very well is emotional overload and the transition between extreme emotions of sort of grief, anger, and then cycling back to everything's fine, flat-out denial. I definitely related in a lot of ways to the if I ignore everything that's making me sad, it'll go away attitude that I had as a teenage boy, and I think that was done really well. I definitely felt that a lot growing up. There is also an awareness of the main character that often he is being knowingly emotionally manipulative. And I like that it didn't shy away from this main character is a whiny jerk sometimes, and it's gonna have consequences. And I know the main character in this book is clearly not intended to be a hero, but most stories with a flawed protagonist are about the sort of unhero becoming good or learning something. But I thought this book was more, this is the main character, this is the effect on society of this kind of person. Like a moral lesson using a situation as a demonstration, rather than an A to B journey about one character. One thing I'm not sure I do agree with is people being guilt-tripped into emotions because of the situation of somebody else, and it did feel at times like the author was rooting for this. And I do agree with the character who was like, I'm being guilted, I don't have any obligation to be here, but maybe I'm just a horrible person. In a very Irvine Welsh way, it's impressive in terms of they've invented sort of a new syntax, invented a lot of slang, and they do keep this up the whole way through the book without explaining anything. And that, for me, feels a lot like looking through a window into society, realistically, and having to work everything out through context. A lot of the slang and sentence structure did feel initially very Jar Jar Binks. You'll understand what I mean if you read this. And though that was off-putting initially, I was very quick to see past it, forgive it, and almost totally ignore it because of what was being said and not how it was being said. And that's a really good point to hammer into any reader, that just because another generation uses language that you think is stupid, uses slang that you don't understand, it doesn't for a second mean that their thoughts and feelings are not as complex or as emotional as yours. So yeah, I think this book is for young people as a sort of, maybe I should reassess my understanding of how society is being filtered through me through the media I use, and for an older generation as a, maybe I should reassess my understanding of people younger than me. And that's done through a filter of almost cartoony, exaggerated sci-fi. Also, I'm a huge sucker for anything dream-related and dream sequences in books. Oh. And there was one dream sequence in here that completely blew me away. Was written incredibly and really captured the disjointed nature of a dream. It came in the story at a time was very strange, and I thought it could easily lead to more, and we'd see another aspect of society or something that was going on in society at the time in relation to things that had happened earlier. But it wasn't followed up, which was disappointing. But the dream sequence itself, pretty good. I really liked the parts where people off the feed were observing people on the feed and how their actions and the voices and the noises they were making just completely did not make sense because you weren't in the bubble with them. And I think that's a good representation of objectivity, being able to stand back and be like, wow, we look dumb. And think, it makes you think as a reader, what was I doing at that age that everybody else was looking at me and thinking, what are they doing? Yeah, one of the best YA sci-fis I've read. Don't read it if you're expecting a happy story about peppy kids. It's recommended to me by my partner, and it's one that I think I will definitely be able to recommend on to the right people. So I'll give this one 6.5 out of 10. Have you read it? Let me know what you thought in the comments. Also, my question of the day is, why is there so much dystopia specifically in YA? It seems like a ridiculously dystopia-heavy genre, and I wonder why that is. What are your thoughts on that? Comment below, let me know. What are you reading right now? Any tags I should do? Anything I should read? Anything you want me to review? Let me know below. Like and subscribe. There's more coming. Hope you're doing good in quarantine. Maybe soon to be broken. Ooh. See you soon.